So I've had a few of you asking about freeze drying and this pantry that we are currently working on. So I have a daughter getting married the end of this year, and my son wants to move into her bedroom. So we turned his bedroom into a walk-in pantry, as this is right next to our kitchen. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of some of the things that I've freeze dried, why I like freeze drying, and a little bit about the freeze drying machine. So to start things off, if you're thinking about investing in a freeze dryer, so I have the medium. The medium is 5 trays, and you always want to pre-freeze your items before you freeze dry them, unless you're doing candy, because there's different modes on here. You've got candy, which is at like 145 degrees. You've got your typical vegetables and meats and things, which you're going to do at about 125 degrees. And then your dairy or your herbs, you're going to do it like 90 degrees. And there's books that talk about that as well. But that's like the quick gist of this. It does have a pump. This is about the noise that it makes. You know, when I have the door closed, we don't even hear the freeze dryer going, even when the pump kicks on. So once stuff is frozen and you put it in the freeze dryer, like right now it's at 3 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been going for about an hour and 20 minutes. But when I put the food in, it was already froze for at least 24 hours or longer. So then what happens is the pump will kick in and it will create vacuum, and you'll see that up here. Like right now it's still in a freeze mode, like it's just freezing the drum. It's making sure that everything that you have in there is good and frozen. And then once the vacuum kicks in, then it's going to start pulling that moisture out of the produce, everything that you have in here, and sucking it to the drum. And then it'll go into a drying phase. And most of my stuff is done in 24 hours. I don't have too much stuff that goes over 24 hours. But then you let it completely thaw. So I always leave my door open. And I have a drain bucket down here. And so as this thaws, it fills like a 5-quart ice cream pail full of water. Depending on how wet your produce or whatever your freeze drying is, can determine how much it's, you know, sucking into that drum. And then you've got that liquid. So just make sure to have a towel around it in case it overflows. My freeze dryer is at an angle going backwards. So as this thaws, when the door is open, I don't have any issue with it running out below it, but some people will put a towel below this. You do need, depending on the type of pump that you buy, you do need to change that oil. And this will actually remind you to do that as well. So here's a quick look at some zucchini that I got ready for the freeze dryer this morning. Now, one thing I definitely recommend if you're going to get a freeze dryer is buy extra trays. So it comes with 5 trays if you buy the medium. If you buy the small, it's 4 trays. The large, I believe, is 6 trays. And for our family of 5, honestly, you could get away with a small. Like, it just, if you want to save some money, a small is just fine. You know, I always feel like with this medium, I have to fill it. Like I always have to be filling it. Like I don't want to just do 4 trays, but there's so many times that 4 trays would be just fine, you know? And I've had my freeze dryer for about a year now. And through the trial and error process in a few minutes, I'll show you some of the things that I've freeze dried. Obviously, I'm still experimenting with things that I like, things that I don't like, and I'll obviously create more content on that as well. So something else that I recommend as far as trays, buy extra trays. And I did get a set with lids, so I only have 1 set of lids, and it works fine because at least I can stack them in the freezer. And then I also bought some half trays, and I just found these on Amazon. And I like that because if I want to do, you know, because there's like a pint's worth of food once it's freeze dried in a half tray, a quart or 2 pints typically per tray is what you're going to get as an end result. So I do like the half trays. I'll do different things in those. And then I have the full trays, but I have enough for 3 batches because I always have 2 batches in the freezer just as we eat food and we don't finish it, I can freeze dry it. Or if I'm cutting up different produce from the garden, you know, or I'm doing treats or things like that, like at least there's some variety that I have. So as far as this side of my pantry, so this is the door that I came in. This was a closet. And so my son has been helping me, you know, finish off the closet with some lumber that we sawed here on the farm. And then I'm also going to be bringing my fridge up here once we change the breaker, because we keep blowing the breaker. So then eventually my fridge and freeze dryer will be here, and the fridge has an upper freezer, which my freeze dryer trays fit in. And so that is going to go there. And then on this wall, I set up my little coffee bar because I love the hot teas and I love coffee. So eventually I'll bring my coffee machine in here once the breaker's changed. And then in here, I have all my extra teas. I have little individual teas. I have jars of teas. And then I'll bring you a little closer. And then this is the tea shelf. So my son put this together for me. It's just the width of some jars. So these all down here, now this is one of the reasons I absolutely love the freeze dryer, is the herbs turn out so much better freeze dried than dehydrated. So much less time. I can do my entire mint plant in one setting versus a dehydrator, which I just have a little dehydrator and it takes forever to dehydrate it. I can have, you know, 5 quarts of tea dehydrated in one run with the freeze dryer. So I absolutely love that. So I did chocolate mint, apple mint, orange mint, mojito mint, peppermint, spearmint, and lemon balm or Melissa last year. I also did some lamb's ear. I did some rose petals, lilac, chamomile. I did rhubarb, cranberry, apples, and then this is just kind of a blend. So like that's my tea shelf. That's one thing that I absolutely love, is for the herbs. And then my son just got this one up the other day. So this is my other wall. And eventually along this wall, I'll have my stainless steel table. And then this other section is going to have a sink and some countertop. And we're going to put storage underneath it so that I actually have a sink in here. As then I don't have to carry all this stuff back and forth to the kitchen. So here I'm going to be working soon on some mason jar mixes. So stay tuned as I'll be having that content coming out. But this is all freeze-dried eggs from last year. And so I've started pulling together things to make omelets. And so I did some caramelized onions. Those turned out amazing. I did some wild leeks or ramps for those of you that live in that kind of an area. I did some jalapenos, bell peppers, mushrooms, zucchini, garlic, some of my basil from this year, dill weed from this year, and then I harvested some dill seeds from my dill plants. And I didn't have to freeze dry the seeds, of course, but like those are all things that I freeze dried, absolutely love. And then I even am trying some different rice mixtures, and I'm going to be freeze drying those because it's so much easier to rehydrate cooked rice as a mix. And so I do really like the rices and the beans because they're just so much faster. Now I'll back you up and show you the rest of my pantry. So this is the one big wall, and obviously this is going to take more than one video to show you. But these are some of the other things that I freeze dried that I really like. So I've done a lot of corn on the cob, raw carrots, garlic. I already mentioned the caramelized onions, the peppers. So this is like my veggie meat section. Celery, avocados. The cucumbers were okay, but not necessarily my favorite. And then I've done soup mixes where you have celery, bell pepper, and onions together. And so I have some of that. I did a little sweet potatoes because my sweet potatoes were going bad. And then those things you know about. But I also like canning. So I've got some canned pickles. I've got canned beef broth. I've got canned venison. And then I've got a couple candies on the bottom. Now the middle section is all fruits. And the fruits were my new experiment this year. So I've got a whole bunch of strawberries from the wild pick strawberries that are not wild, but the farm raised strawberries that we got. I have a whole bunch of juices from last year. So apples, pears, peaches, grape. I also did blueberry, banana. I did a fun banana split mix. This was one of my favorites because I love banana splits. So it's pineapple, strawberries, bananas with chocolate chips in there, and then nuts. So, and then you could just pour this on top of ice cream. So the fun thing about freeze-dried food is that it's crunchy if you don't want to rehydrate it. So you can just put it on stuff and it starts to rehydrate. Now I do prefer, for those of you wondering about the jars versus bags, I do prefer the jars. One, I like looking at it and it's easy to reuse. So people are always getting rid of jars. You can just watch Marketplace or, you know, watch sales going on at the stores. But I do like the fact that these are reusable. The bags are one-time use. I know there are some reusable ones, but then you got to be particular about like green beans go in green beans and onions go in onions. And I just didn't want to have to mess with that. I need simple. So I prefer the jars, but I will put things in bags. If you buy the really good quality Mylar bags, those are great. They'll hold up. Make sure you use your oxygen absorbers. So you're going to want oxygen absorbers in all of your foods. I had somebody ask me this yesterday. Yes, I have done the vacuum sealing, but if you don't put a ring on it and that vacuum seal pops off, now your food is exposed to the air and it's going to start rehydrating, and then it's going to lose its crunch. So I prefer always putting an oxygen absorber in there and leaving the ring on it. If you want to vacuum seal it, it's totally up to you. I've just not had great success with it. So this is my method of choice. Now, if you're doing candy, they also have like moisture absorbers. And so those are good to put in candy, especially if you're putting them in Mylar bags, because those, once they start to rehydrate, and even some of your fruits, if they're really sweet, you may want to put those moisture absorbers in there so that it doesn't clump together. So that's something that I'm still working on playing with as well. But then I got pineapple, raspberry, cranberries. I did canned peaches this year. I did freeze-dried peaches last year, but I haven't really, nobody in my house seems as excited to eat the freeze-dried fruit. They prefer it canned, which I know loses a lot of the nutrients. And of course, that's the bigger reason why people like freeze-dried, is it holds the moisture or the nutrients better than if you're canning it. And so like, here's some freeze-dried pears. I have canned pears. We actually did 180 quarts this year. I have a whole bunch of bananas, and now that I have a little grandbaby, I can't wait to see him snacking on some bananas. And then I have watermelon and peach, which I ground into a powder for lemonades and things like that. I did do grapes. Those turned out great. I even did pumpkin bars. So I mixed up a pumpkin bar recipe, and then I did it more on the dairy setting. And then I poured what would be an 8x8 in a pan. And then all I have to do is add moisture back to this, make the crust, and I can bake it. I've also done some cherries. I mentioned the rhubarb. We have applesauce. And I did do, this is how picky my family is. So I did do fruit salad, like in a jar with the vanilla pudding that was in one of the freeze-dry recipe books that I saw. And my family doesn't care for it. So it's like, well, do you dump it out because they don't like it, or just make it for the next church potluck? So anyway, my family, we've discovered we prefer the individual ingredients, or at least I do, over mixes in cases like this, because not everybody likes it. So that can be fun. And then over here, I just have those canned pears. I have salsa. I'm working on like still organizing my pantry. And so I've got a whole bunch of beans. I'm going to be working on tomatoes. And then I've got like some of my extra stuff in here. So if you have any other questions about freeze drying, or like you need a shopping link or something like that, because I do have an affiliate link to the free Harvest Right freeze dryer. And the last I looked, the price was $1,700 for a small, $2,400 for a medium. So like I said, if you want to save some money, just buy one that's 4 trays. Because honestly, if you're running your freeze dryer on a daily basis, you're going to make up so much stuff like us that it's like going to take us a long time to actually use it all. And so this year I've been much more consistent now that the freeze dryer is in the house. Last year I had it out in our barn in the milk house because it was just, I didn't have a space for it. And it does get hot, like it does put off some heat. So I also have a fan in the window in our my pantry here to be sucking in cooler air. Or in the winter or summer months, I was trying to blow the hot air out. So making sure that you have a well-ventilated room that gives you some options so that the freeze dryer doesn't get too hot. Because it will tell you on the screen that it's going to slow down your freeze drying process because it's too hot. So anyway, that's a few of my quick tips and a little bit of a quick tour of my pantry, which is still in the process of being done. So if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more of my freeze drying videos. I definitely have some shorts out there. If you want to see some of the different things that I'm freeze drying, but otherwise it's been a really fun opportunity and experience so far. And I do almost prefer freeze drying over canning on certain things. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.